Hey everybody, I'm Erin. I'm the CEO and founder of Pear Tree. I'm also a two-time adoptive mom, and I'm joined today by
I'm Jess. I am the community manager here at Pear Tree, and I am a two-time birth mom.
and we wanted to record a video today to talk about a question that we get all the time, and that is, how do I adopt? How do I adopt, Jess? That's we get multiple times a week,
All
and so
day, every day.
yes. And if you were going to do a quick Google search, that would return thousands of websites and articles filled with all kinds of information that is totally overwhelming. And some of that information might be at odds with each other. And so we thought we would just let's just record a video and walk people through. It's definitely intricate and complex, but the most kind of basic answer to how do I adopt. And so we classify there's kind of six things we have to walk through in terms of how do I adopt. And the very first one is answering the question, is adoption right for you? So, what's the first thing you recommend in terms of kind of deciding in this category one, is adoption right for you, Jess?
Yeah, I feel like the first thing that you need to do, and you even need to do this if you are a single person adopting or if you are in a marriage or a partnership adopting, is you need to have a really big conversation about is adoption right for you because it's not as easy as you might think it's going to be. It's not simple. You need to make sure that you discuss open adoption and get on the same page with your partner regarding open adoption. I feel like so many families that we talk to, one knows a lot about open adoption and is on board, one is hesitant. And when you're starting the journey, that's a big conversation that you need to have beforehand. And then you both need to decide whether or not you're all in on adoption. I feel like also so often we have one partner or spouse that is very on board, leading the ship, and the other is kind of reserved and more behind the scenes. And to do adoption well, you both have to be all in.
Yeah.
Um, and you
And
really need to have
it's a lifetime.
it is. It's not, adoption doesn't end when you have
Ever.
that sweet little kiddo in your home. It's a lifelong process.
Mhm.
And especially if you're coming to adoption after infertility, that's another big conversation that you and your partner need to have
Yeah.
and
I
make
think
sure that,
I was on that infertility tip. I think we see a lot, people think this is like a replacement, and it's not. It's a completely different, it can be, beautiful, but it is a completely different path to parenting, and you have to go in eyes wide open in terms of what
yeah,
that means.
absolutely. And you have to understand that adoption is a journey and it is a lengthy, sometimes costly process. And I think you need to understand that and make sure that you are not only willing to be on this journey that is full of some really high highs, but also some really low lows. It is a roller coaster ride. And you have to make sure that you understand that this isn't going to happen tomorrow. And you have to make sure that you are aware of the costs that come along with the adoption process.
Average costs $25,000 to $90,000 for private adoption,
Yeah.
depending on your path through it.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's not like not everything is due at once. You can kind of stair step into those costs, but um, $25,000 to $90,000 is what is the average right now, and we all know that's high, and Pear Tree is working very hard to see what we can do in terms of working with people to make sure that that becomes more accessible to more people. And talking to healthcare benefits and all that kind of thing. But it's as of right now, if you're going to adopt, $25,000 to $90,000.
Yes.
And then the other thing I would say on that is, and we're not trying to scare people out of adoption. We're just trying to make sure people know what it is right
Yeah.
now, because there's also, depending on the way, if you choose to pursue adoption, depending on how you path through adoption, can have ramifications on the adoption for life. And most of that is around kind of the ethics and
Hmm.
how expectant moms are treated in this process. Um, you know, no one wants a woman picking adoption if that's not what she wants.
Right.
But because of those costs that we just talked about, there is some pretty coercive and predatory behavior that happens. And so making sure that if adoption is something that you pursue, that you are guided by licensed ethical adoption professionals throughout the entirety of your journey. And we can help set you up with the right ones here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so say like, all right, yes, we've had these big conversations. Yes, we're prepared financially. We're committed to, licensed ethical adoption professionals. How do I know which path, or what are my options in terms of pathing through adoption? What are the adoption paths I can take?
Yeah, you've got a couple of different paths that you can take. Probably the first decision you need to make is whether you want to pursue domestic adoption or international adoption. And I will say that in 2024, especially after COVID, you're seeing a really big decline in international adoption. There aren't a lot of countries that are still participating in international adoption with the US. And so the majority of adoptions that take place, private adoptions, are domestic, but there are still some options for international, especially if you're interested in special needs adoptions or adopting older kiddos. International adoption can be a really great path for you to take. But that's the first biggest conversation that you need to have is domestic versus international adoption.
And then if you have chosen domestic, the second conversation is public, which sometimes is called foster, or
Hmm.
private adoption. And
Yes.
the kind of objectives for those two different paths are very different. So the objective of public/foster is to reunify the child with their biological family. The
Yes.
objective of private adoption is to permanently place a child in a home. And so it's not to say that, of course, we've all heard that sometimes in foster, the parental rights will eventually be terminated, in which case the child can be permanently placed into a home. But the overall goal of foster is to reunify that child with their biological family. And so and they sometimes have different processes in terms of the home study.
Hmm.
Like different, a home study for private adoption it's not equal to a home study for foster. And so they have you need to decide on that path before you get started, because the very first step is different in both of those.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
I think just addressing the cost issue is um, private adoption. When we were talking about costs earlier in terms of 25 to 90, those are the costs associated with private adoption.
Hmm.
Um, it's little to none.
Nothing. Yeah. Most of the costs are, if they're not fully covered, you're often reimbursed for most of the costs. If you are a foster parent or are adopting through the foster care system. And that's not to say that there are not tons of kiddos in the foster care system that need permanency. Most states have registries or lists of kiddos who have been in the foster care system sometimes for years, and their parents' parental rights have already been terminated and they need permanency, and oftentimes it's older kiddos or sibling groups. And so if that's on your heart, if you're able to open up your hearts and home to older kiddos or sibling groups that are often very difficult to place in homes, then adopting through the foster care system can be a really rewarding and fulfilling experience.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so that's number two, which is which adoption path is right for you. Okay, so moving on to number three. You've decided on private, and you want to continue through into private adoption, domestic private adoption. So the first step for domestic private adoption is what's called a home study. And
With
what this is you have to be approved in your state to adopt. And once you're approved in your state, you can go outside the state to connect or match with an expectant parent. But you need to be approved in your state of residence to adopt. And what that looks like is typically hiring somebody that's called either a home study provider in your state, or an adoption agency that does home studies is kind of the other most common option. And a home study is um, is a kind of a, I don't know, how would you describe it, just kind of a very in-depth interview
Yeah.
process. You're filling out forms. There are background clearances run. You're getting references from friends and family. Sometimes your employer, from a doctor. You're
You're
submitting
getting your,
things.
yep.
But it's like it's an evaluation of you because this person, this home study provider, is going to say yes, they are, quote unquote, approved to adopt. And I think a lot of adopting families approach this as like, so nervous. I would probably say 99% of families get approved. If I think the only like, absolute red flag, like X is if you've ever been convicted or accused of a crime against a child,
Yeah,
uh, that's a almost guaranteed no. But if you
absolutely.
have a
And as it should
DUI,
be.
yeah, of course, yeah. But we talk to families too, and they're like, I got a DUI when I was 19.
19.
Would I be allowed to adopt? And uh, you know, don't let that stop you. The answer is most likely yes, as long as you can show that you've kind of mitigated those circumstances.
Yeah,
So the first step is a home study, and you can find a home study provider in any state on Peertree. The process takes, you can move through it very, very fast. We've had families get through it in a week or two, especially if they need a home study fast,
right.
because we're connected with an expectant mom somewhere. But I think average timeline is probably 6 to 8 weeks to get through it at a normal pace. And we have a lot of the adoption professionals that partner with Peertree, we have a very streamlined digital process to walk through, so it's not a bunch of paperwork that you're filling out. And the last thing I will say about that is it is one of the most, it can be an incredibly nurturing and bonding experience for you when you think about why you want to become a parent, if you're adopting with another person, why that person thinks you'll be a good parent, why you think that person will be a good parent. It's an incredibly bonding experience, I think, and it's just soul serving if you're doing it right.
Yeah. And as a birth mom, it brings such a sense of comfort to birth parents knowing that these people that you're choosing from pictures or a book, you know that they are essentially licensed. They have good backgrounds, they're financially stable, they have a safe and secure home to bring your kiddo home to. So the home study process also brings a sense of comfort to expectant and birth parents along the way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then I think some of the things that you have to be prepared to talk about in a home study that I think are really important are things like race. Like
Yeah.
my husband and I are white, and when we were asked, this is kind of embarrassing to say out loud, but when we were asked by the home study provider, do you have a preference in terms of race for a child? And we said, no, any race. We don't see color. And she scoffed at us and kind of like furrowed her brow and was like, but the world does. So like, what are you going to do to make sure, like, if you adopt a child of a different race, how are you going to change your lives to make sure that that child is growing
Yeah.
up? And we're like, she kind of put us in our place, and we're like, oh, it's a good question.
But
In
that's what the
terms,
home study process is for, to like ask and answer those tough questions and educate yourselves on race, prenatal exposure, all of those things.
yeah. Yeah, so I think it's this process of like there'll be a little bit of, you'll have to dig deep to get some of the answers, and you want to be as open and honest as you possibly can in that process. Okay, so that is the first step in the process. So the very next step, once you're approved to adopt, you don't get any kind of like badge or medal or anything once you're approved. You literally, the home study provider will say like, you're approved. And sometimes you'll get a copy of the home study report if you're in a state that allows that. Sometimes you won't.
Yeah.
But they'll either way, the home study provider or agency will provide you with some kind of piece of paper that says they are approved to adopt. In which case, you are now allowed to start kind of the outreach marketing matching process. And that, yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Which is a huge, daunting step in the process, but it's the first step in kind of building your team in the adoption process and deciding So you're pursuing domestic infant adoption, and now you have to decide, who do you want on your team? Who do you want to work with on your journey? Do you want to partner with an agency? Do you want to work with an adoption attorney? Or do you want to do a hybrid and have lots of people on your team?
Yeah. And I think in today's modern world, I think it is almost essential that you have, again, this is a little bit of pear treeism, but we want to make sure that you get national outreach, but have local licensed guidance from your adoption professional. So we would always recommend that you have some kind of an online presence. We hope it's on Pear Tree through your licensed adoption professional, but there are other platforms. We would want to make sure that your agency or your attorney, they all get phone calls from different places about an expectant mom. And so you want to make sure that they have your material so that they can, quote unquote, present you if you meet the criteria for the expectant mom that they're working with. And then we have a bunch of other free outreach methods that we have linked in different insight articles across our website too, that we make readily available. There are free methods to do outreach. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg. There are also methods where you can spend an arm and a leg. And so, and it's everything in between. So it doesn't mean that if you spend the most money, you will adopt the fastest. It does that.
It does not.
Those two things don't have to go hand in hand.
No.
And so I would say we can probably even link some of those articles in this so that you have access to those. But you definitely need some kind of online presence, and you want to make sure your licensed adoption professional has your materials at the very least.
Yes. So what are your adoption materials that you're going to need?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of 3 essentials in this process. One of them is literally an online profile. And whether you build that yourself or you build it through a platform like Peartree, the one thing you want to make sure is a profile unto itself is not an advantage. A profile that is getting eyeballs from expectant mothers is an advantage. So there are endless amounts of places where you say build your adoption profile, but are there expectant moms viewing those profiles? Can they prove to you that expectant moms are viewing those profiles? Because if not, all it's doing is giving you false hope and kind of wasting your time in building a profile.
Exactly.
The second one I would say is a profile book. And I remember when I was going through this, I was like, what? Really? We're creating brochures on ourselves? But they're used. They're still used in adoption. And Jess, why don't you talk about how they're used?
I might be old school. I love profile books, and I also might love profile books because I get to be the one to help create them. But I think a profile book is such a necessary part of your adoption outreach because it really allows you to tell a story. It gives you lots of opportunities to create a connection with an expectant family. And it also allows expectant parents to get a glimpse into your life and your home, which is ultimately the life and home that their kiddo is going to be placed in. And sometimes you just can't create that connection and tell that story through an online profile. And so putting in the effort and creating a very strong profile book, it can really be the difference in an expectant mom reaching out or moving on.
Yeah, agreed. And then the last one is a video. And I think these are things, well, and I should say the profile book, if you're going to get it created anywhere, just make sure that it meets the criteria for your licensed adoption professional. Because every single adoption professional has a slightly different criteria for what they want. And then also you want a PDF and you want printed copies.
Yes.
Because you want to you can hand those printed copies to other adoption professionals that you're working with, or other places that you feel like you should leave a profile book where an expected mother might potentially see it. And then so the third kind of outreach material is a video. And videos, like what Jess said, brochures are beautiful, but videos really bring people to life for obvious reasons, like the way somebody talks, the pace at which they talk, how they interact with the other person if there's two people adopting. Context on how they sit, body language, all those things just make you and make you real to an expectant mom and give her a
Mm-hmm.
better idea of who you are. And so um, profile videos, and even better if you can host a profile video on your online profile and have access to that video to use in things like social media or give to your friends and family to post on their accounts or share with other adoption professionals, that it becomes a tool for you that you can use again and again and again. And then, like I said, I think there's a ton of other outreach. There's a ton of other ways to do outreach, and we'll link it in here in terms of kind of the guide that we put together to do that, because I think also most adopting families feel like as long as they're doing something and they feel that momentum on that journey, it makes that waiting period a little bit easier.
Definitely.
Because you honestly, like, that it's, there's no silver bullet in this. Like, there's always going to be an aspect of serendipity in adoption. And so the more kind of, you don't know when you're going to connect. I know Jess connected with a family because she was getting a pedicure.
Yeah, you never know where and when you're going to connect with an expectant mom or connect with someone who knows an expectant mom. In my case, I didn't directly connect with my kiddo's parents. Um, my best friend at the time was at a bridal shower getting a pedicure with one of her best friends, who was my daughter's adoptive mom's best friend. And
Yeah.
so that level of serendipity put us all kind of in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So the more comfortable you are with saying, like, we're adopting, um, just the more opportunity you will probably see. Okay, and then the last thing. So once you have built all your outreach, eventually you will connect with an expectant mom, and that's why you want to have a licensed adoption professional to guide you through that process. We won't get into that today, but I just think it's one of the hardest things about an adoption journey is, like, how long is this going to take? In terms of, from the
That's the
time I
million
build my
dollar question.
profile, yeah, and so from the time I build my profile, like, how long will this take? And so what's your recommendation on that, Jess?
To just be patient and know that it's not about how many expectant moms you present to or connect with. It's about connecting with the right one ultimately at the end of the day. And when it's the right expectant mom and the right kind of situation for your family, then it will be right, and you'll know it, and it will make all of the waiting absolutely worthwhile. So
Yeah.
just be patient.
Yeah. Which is hard to hear, but I think that's good in terms of, just let's end there in terms of providing any more guidance, and just know, like, we're always here. We're happy to meet one-on-one if it's helpful. And we'll link some additional insights in this video, and there's a ton of information on our website in terms of getting this information and or additional information.
And we have our adoption guides that we've created. We have a single person's guide to adoption, a couple's guide to adoption, guides to adoption for specific types, whether you're specifically pursuing special needs or transracial adoption. We have tons of more resources available on our website. But this was a great intro into how do I adopt?
Yes, and there's more coming your way soon.
And if you want to reach out and schedule time with us, you can email us at hello@peartreefamily.com. Anytime, we are here to help every step of the way.
Thanks.